Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. Ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Monday morning, October the 30th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Drew Hicken is on the other side of the glass making things work. How are you, sir?
I am doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm fine. You smiling through it on a Monday. Well, where do we go from here? Here's the thing. Be careful what you wish for, because I've said it, the last 3 weeks? I just want to come on here and talk about something other than a close loss, something other than a game where Florida State messes around with a team, has a chance at the end, and blows it. Boy, did I get my wish. 35-3. Chestnut Hill. Drew, before we get into anything, did you ever, in your wildest dreams, think 35-3 was going to happen?
No. And a team and a game. We said it all week. Granted, you didn't like the situation and the way the team was going and things of that nature. But somebody even tweeted it out. Last 4 years, when you've signed 63, 64, 4 and 5-star prospects to Boston College's 4. And it just shows you how the talent on the roster that you have versus what they've got. To lose like that it's just inexcusable. There's nothing else to say.
But first, before we get into any of that, thanks so much for waking up with us here 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, the TuneIn Radio app, of course, our own WTSM app, podcast on iTunes, Podcast Republic, WarChantRadio.com, YouTube, yada, 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 radio at WarChant.com. Oh, we've already got questions, folks. When Renegade Express this week is going to be real fun. So send them our way to radio at WarChant.com, at Wake Up War Chant's the Twitter account, where you can do that as well. And, of course, our friends at For the Table make all this stuff work. Madison Social, Central Township, and the So Dough Baking Company, all right here in the capital city of Tallahassee. Before we talk about that other game, I want to talk about another game that I was working. As some of you know, one of the jobs that I have around this town is I get the chance to cover prep football usually on Friday nights. I go out, shoot it for our friends over at WCTV Eyewitness News here in town, CBS affiliate. And before we get to a game on Friday night against Boston College, let me get to you a game in Quincy, just down the road. Monroe High School, of course, for those of you who don't know Monroe, small private high school, Quincy, Florida. They're 1-9 this year. And they went up against St. Francis Catholic from Gainesville. They were destroyed. It was not a close game. It was, I believe, 46-6 at the half, if I have that right. And if there's any Monroe folks listening, I'm not trying to pile on. As a matter of fact, just stay with me here. I think you're going to quite like where this goes. 46-6 at half. It didn't end well either. 61-14, your final score. 1-9 against a team in St. Francis that's now 7-0, a team that you knew you probably didn't have much of a chance of beating. But you know what? Monroe fought throughout the whole game. Whenever something happened to them, they looked upset. They let it get to them. It bothered them. They were frustrated, and above all, they cared. I went from that. I left Quincy. I went back to the newsroom to cut that and watched Florida State Boston College on my television there in the newsroom with all of us gathered around, the WCTV sports staff, everybody, anchors, reporters, jaws agape at what they saw. You want to know why? Because they saw a team that was more talented than the other team. Saw a team that should probably have a winning record at the moment. And you know what? They were getting destroyed. And they were down big at half. And they got blown out at the end. And you know what? I didn't see the fight that I saw from those kids in Quincy just down the road. I didn't see guys getting frustrated after bad plays. I didn't see anyone who really looked like they cared that they were getting blown out by Boston College. When you don't care that the house is being destroyed the house has a problem. There is a culture problem at Florida State at the moment. This idea that everything is going to be okay because we are Florida State and we do have this bowl streak and we do have 3 titles and we have won so many conference championships. Somehow, some way, a complacency has slipped into this program that I'm not even sure if it was there at times during the lost decade. And those teams were far less talented than what this squad has right now. What you saw on Friday was an embarrassment to one of the greatest programs in college sports. Florida State football has so much money and so much backing and so much effort. And for that performance to go out there against Boston College, a team that you're far more talented than, a team that your assistants are paid far more than, facilities that are far better than theirs, to go out and look like that is an absolute embarrassment to that program. More than Louisville, more than Virginia back in 2011, more, just almost as much as Wake in 2006. I won't say as much as 30-0, but that was an absolute embarrassment, start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I for the most part have been on the train of thought that, you know, this team's not as bad as we think it is. They've had a lot of unfortunate breaks, you know, give Jimbo a break, this and that. There was absolutely no excuse for what we saw on Friday night. Changes have to be made, point blank, end of story. This is nothing more than a culmination of years and years where Jimbo should have made changes and he just hasn't because of his quote-unquote loyalty to his staff. There's no reason why a school like Florida State should have to make five or six firings in one off season, and that's exactly what's going to need to happen. I mean, you could all these there's just such a, like you said, there's an issue. Something's broken here. You can say it's the Francois injury all you want, but it's just not anymore. Because guess what? Even with Francois, this football team is more than likely 5-2. And if you're 5-2 in a year where you're supposed to be national title good, everybody would be losing their mind almost just as much as this team being 2-5, and there would be no excuses for it. And we talked about it before. The offense, you know, you got a little bit of excuses. You don't have an excuse to put up 3 points at Boston College by any means, but that defense has no excuse at all. There's just not injuries there. You have your leaders, and you're just getting swamped. That was the hardest football game I can remember watching in a while. And we talked about it a little bit. It's like the team thinks that, you know, the poop don't stink. It's ridiculous. They quit. You can paint it whatever way you want. We talked about when is it gonna come? When's it gonna happen? You worried about the Louisville game last week. They finally quit. That was the end. And you know what? It got me to thinking. I almost wonder if the worst possible thing for this football team was for them to win that Orange Bowl last year. Because I feel like, you know, we talked about, oh, maybe that gets momentum going in the right direction. I think it did the exact wrong thing. I think it made all these guys think that they had fixed something that was already broken, that they were a little better than they were, that we just went and won the Orange Bowl, and we're going to just coast through this offseason. We're going to have the same team, and look how we finished last year. If we had started last year like we finished, we would have played for a national title. And I think what you've seen here is just a culmination of the past 2 to 3 years where things could have been really bad, but Florida State pulled out a lot of games that they probably shouldn't have, and they're just not able to do that. They've had every break go against them this year. I'm not saying they haven't been unlucky, but to lose by 32 points to that Boston College team. And by the way, Wake Forest, Johnny Wolford just threw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns against that Louisville team that we had 7 offensive points going into the fourth quarter against last week. I mean, you're worse than you thought. Miami beat a 1-7 North Carolina team by 5 points. Yeah, they're in the top 10, but they're gonna get the floor wiped with them by that Notre Dame team. They're not very good. And it's just there's just so much to say. We could talk about it for forever.
Not to mention a Saturday night date with Virginia Tech for the Miami Hurricanes this week that might be the first loss for the Canes of this year. I do agree with you. They lose one of those 2 games at the very least. But overall, when you stack all this up, you're right, man. You've run out of excuses. You've absolutely run out of excuses. You've built a culture over the last couple years where you just expect good things to happen for Florida State. We're Florida State. Who cares if we play down to the level of our competition because we're going to pull it out of our rear end? Who cares if this because that? Who cares if we slack off because we're going to make that big play that changes things? You mentioned it. The luck's been bad, but the problem is good teams should be above the idea of good luck and bad luck outside of rare exceptions. The kick six at Auburn in 2013 is a very rare exception for the University of Alabama football program. Some of the things that have happened to Ohio State over the years, very rare exceptions for what's happened to that program. Just like when Jim Tressel's teams used to randomly lose to Purdue every couple years. Random exceptions. Week after week after week, Florida State used to rely on dumb good luck to get wins. 2015 happened a lot. Last year, that Ole Miss game, Chad Kelly just completely craps the bed. 2014, Notre Dame runs a pick play that they'd already run earlier in the game, and it gets caught after you give up the game-winning touchdown. Florida State has lived on the edge for almost a third of a decade now, and this season it finally caught up to them. And I think you finally saw what the mental fortitude of this program is, what this house of cards is when it finally gets shaken and the breaks don't go their way. Friday night was the culmination of something that's happened that's been waiting for a very, very long time because the house of cards finally toppled over when those guys finally realized we can't rely on luck anymore. This is our mess, and it just kind of seemed like nobody cared.
This team was done when it was 7-0 and we fumbled on the 10-yard line or whatever it was. You saw that look. That was one of the most mentally weak performances I've ever seen. And the arrogance of this football team, they've almost ridden the coattails of the 2013 and 2014 Seminoles and haven't done a damn thing in the last 2 and 3 years. Like I said, the only thing they've had to really hang their hat on is that they won the Orange Bowl last year against a Michigan team that a lot of people felt like should have been in the playoff had they not collapsed a little bit there late. It's just frustrating to watch on any level. It's just there's so many problems, and at least we finally are starting to hear Jimbo voice his frustrations, and we're listen. I guarantee you that maybe this is what you needed to. There's no more excuses. Wholesale changes have to come. If Jimbo, and again, I've said to everybody who thinks Jimbo's getting fired, that's crazy talk. But in the long term, if he wants to save his job and continue to be at Florida State, he needs to make these changes. And they're changes that are long overdue. Long overdue. I already said there's absolutely no excuse for Florida State to have to make 6 coaching changes in an offseason unless you're firing a head coach. And we're not firing Jimbo. So the fact that has to be done just goes to show you that he's forgotten to take out the trash for quite too long. And you know what? We'll see what he does there, but I don't expect it to be a midseason thing either. And I'll tell you this too. I don't expect this football team to play very well for the rest of the year. I don't expect us to beat Syracuse. I'm done riding with them every week. This Friday was it showed me everything that we were worried about. This team is done. They're done. They might beat a terrible Florida team, and that won't mean anything because they don't even have their head coach anymore, and they're in shambles just as much as we are. But get to the offseason, make some changes, and hopefully you can rejuvenate this program and this message that you're trying to sell.
You know, Drew, you mentioned it. Next segment, you're going to hear from head coach Jimbo Fisher. Gene Williams interview, and we've listened to it. Maybe you've listened to it by now. We put it on the website last night. But Jimbo's very, very frank, and I think for the first time publicly, you're going to hear him some of these interviews that he's going to give, and maybe even at his press conference today, the frankness that he understands, and he understands fully and now publicly that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. There's a culture issue that needs to be stopped, and whatever's going on, it can't just be, well, we've just got to find the inches. No, you've got to change the process. You've got to change the way things are done, or else you're never going to find those inches. Or else those inches turn into feet, which turn to yards, which turn into miles. And that sort of separation is not the type of thing that a program like Florida State should have. And when you look at Saturday, this Saturday to me has become the most interesting game of the year. Sandwiched in between a game against Clemson, which maybe you come out and look like you care against Clemson, maybe you don't. I don't know. But Syracuse, after you get demoralized, I think this is a big week for Jimbo Fisher and just how big of a reign does he have on his program? Just where does he have the finger on the pulse of his program? You're right. It's not for his job. It's not to put him on the hot seat or anything like that. But it is the idea that, can Jimbo Fisher push the right buttons? Can he get his team to perform in a situation where there's absolutely nothing left to perform for? Nothing. Can they do it? Can they respond? Can they look anywhere near decent after arguably the lowest low of Jimbo Fisher's tenure? I'm curious to see it. We got plenty more to discuss after this. Jimbo Fisher's interview, and then after that, a little chat with Ira Schoffel. You may have read his column over the weekend, but he has some things to say as well. It's all on the other side. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
I've got a song, I ain't got no melody. I'm gonna sing it to my friends.
Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant. We're here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and we get it once a week. Coach Jimbo Fisher joins us after being able to look back at the game, give us a few more details. And, Coach, obviously rough loss up at Boston. How are you and you personally, and how's the team handling all this right now?
Well, we're very disappointed and discouraged as far as how we played. We were awful in the game. We didn't play very good in all three phases, and we have to coach better in all three phases. And that starts with me. And I can say the first games, the other games we lost, listen, we made technical errors and key moments, but we competed very well. Our fans deserve better as far as how we competed in this game. And we're going to get that fixed. I promise you that. We're going to compete in games. And that was the first game we lined up and just got beat. And that's very disappointing.
And, Coach, I know you said after the game that you guys didn't quit. And it seemed, even though the score where they were ahead, it seemed like you were somewhat competitive that first half. Second half, I think you guys had 39 total yards in the second half. If they didn't kind of give up on you, what happened in the second half to the mentality of the team?
It's 2 3rd and 1, fumbled a punt. That gave them the ball back. We had a 3-and-out. We missed a block. Early on that first drive, then we got a first down, had a drop ball. Then we held them, and then we dropped a punt. And they scored. We got the ball back. Went to drive. Missed 2 3rd and 1s in that scenario. Missed a 3rd and 1, the 4th and 1. Went for it, and missed a 3rd and 1 later, and just didn't convert. We just didn't execute. We ran the ball, got a couple yards here, never to get many first downs, and just didn't execute at the right time. That wasn't about quitting. We just didn't execute and get done what we need to get done. Defensively, the 2 scores we gave up come off of the drop punt and the 4th down turnover, but at the same time, we don't give up just too many yards in some different situations, and didn't know how to execute.
And, Coach, a rough outing for James Blackman. Obviously, freshmen are going to have that's why you don't see too many freshmen starting. They're going to have ups and downs. Obviously, a rough night for him. How's he holding up after the last couple games?
Again, disappointed about some scenarios. We had some opportunities that we could have got back in the game, but he's disappointed, but he'll be ready to work.
Would you consider at this point making a change at quarterback? Or are you going to stick with James?
I'm not going to, publicly talk about personnel decisions and publicly. We'll do them behind the scenes, but I won't. I don't want to address them. I'm not upset about that. Just not going to do that publicly.
Okay, I respect that, Coach. That's fine. And defensively, obviously, especially that first half, I think they had over 200 yards, almost 150 rushing yards. Yep. And you guys have been, except for Lamar Jackson, who kind of does it to everybody. You guys have been actually pretty good against the run this season. How were they able to be so effective with you on the ground, especially that first half?
We had to fit gaps better. We had to fall in outside and have misfits on how we were fitting the gap from either safety linebacker situations. 6 of them would do it, 7 of them wouldn't. They find a little crease in there and push it, and we're also very physical. Allowing 3-yard runs to become 5-yard runs, pushing the pile, doing things like that, and we just didn't fit them at the right way and play physical enough at the point of attack.
Now, you mentioned special teams, Coach. Obviously, another rough night down. Without getting into specifics on personnel, would you consider shaking some things up there as well, since some things haven't gone right?
We have to evaluate things, like we said, and get better. We had the 2 messed up punts, and we had a critical penalty on a big return we had, and I had a roughing the kicker was Now, that was very skeptical, but at the same time, that was 4 critical penalties on special teams, and we had been doing a great job. So we'll look at everything and make our judgments.
Now, I know you said, I believe a couple of times you've been asked about it, so you're not a fan of doing anything mid-season in terms of coaching changes or any major staff shakeups. So would you reconsider that the way things have gone, or are you still going to confident in your staff right now?
I just said I'm not going to comment publicly on personnel.
Gotcha, Coach. Well, let me see if you'll do this, because obviously news came out not too long ago that Coach McElwain was let go at Florida. After 7 games, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Jim's a great guy. I don't know all the circumstances, but he's a heck of a guy and a heck of a football coach, and I know he'll do well. And I hate it for him and his family and for the players at Florida.
And, Coach, obviously you got some young guys who are getting more and more playing times. Do you consider doing that and giving some of the younger guys more reps at this point as the season goes on?
Again, we'll evaluate the things that we got to do that we think will put the best guys to win the game and what we're trying to do, and we just got to keep doing that.
Now, Coach, looking ahead, obviously you've made, like you say, every year you evaluate things in the off season. I know you guys look pretty close internally at how things have gone for you. Do you also look externally at ways some other programs have done things? And the way I point out specifically, obviously, some things at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly did a lot of things there. Would you actually look outside to see how other people do stuff?
We look everywhere. We always look outside. We're constantly looking inside, outside, and around at different scenarios.
All right, Coach, the last thing we'll just talk about Syracuse. Obviously, a very unique system they run. Dino Babers has them playing really well up there with that up-tempo offense. I mean, how do you get your guys prepared for such a unique offensive system?
Well, you're going to have to be very disciplined in the looks and what they do. And then what you didn't realize that a week ago, they were in the top 10 in the country and 3 and outs on defense, too. So they're very unorthodox on defense, just like they are on offense. And what I mean by that, a lot of different coverages, looks, scenarios, 3-3 personnels, and different things in which they do, and can cause you a lot of looks both ways. Dino's doing a great job with those guys. They're actually playing very well. With the
at least you got the game earlier, a day early. Did you give your guys a little bit of extra time off this week to kind of regroup?
No, we have to. I mean, Saturday had to be the day off for the week before because we had no day, and Sunday's our day off for the next week, so there's nothing we're allowed to do with them.
Gotcha.
To NCAA quality. I mean, so that's the NCAA rules.
Do you think that may be helpful to have a couple days of just downtime?
Well, hopefully get to reevaluate things, soul search some things, and be ready to hopefully be fresh when you get back on the field on Monday.
All right, Coach. Well, I appreciate it. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Darn pop-ups and video ads.
Are you wasting your time again on clickbait FSU updates that are bloated down with ads?
Yeah. And after crashing my computer, the information isn't even up to date. You're on warchant.com. What's really going on with the Seminoles?
For the real scoop, you'll need to get your own War Chant subscription.
What's it cost?
Free. There's a 30-day trial offer right now.
You know I like free. Sign me up.
Use the promo code WARCHANT30. That's WARCHANT30. Nobody has more accurate and timely information on the Noles than WARCHANT.com.
WARCHANT.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Roll along here on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. You just heard from head coach Jimbo Fisher. And now let's hear from our own Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of warchant.com. Ira, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. Let's dive right into this because obviously we've got a lot to talk about. And first of all, you were there as our representation up in Boston. From the view of the Alumni Stadium press box, just how bad was it?
You know what, man? I almost feel like it might have been worse there than on TV. And the only reason I say that is because I went back and watched the game the next day on Saturday, on the replay on my computer, watch ESPN. And, which you didn't really gather all the time. And I know sometimes they showed the players on the sideline kind of like being down or disinterested and that type of thing. But I really felt like that. I felt like I noticed that even more so at the stadium, and just just seeing, just kind of going through the motions. It was almost like, watching a game. You never got the sense that they were losing by 30 points. I mean, you never got the sense that the team realized that they were getting blown out. It just felt like they were just playing plays. They'd run out there and play the play, and then go back to the sideline. And again, I just think even the things like after a play, they'd be down 21 or 24 or 27 points, whatever it was, and like somebody would make a good play and kind of celebrate or talk smack to the other team. And it's like, man, do you realize you're getting punked by Boston College? So it was a weird vibe, the entire game. And I just, besides the mistakes and all the problems, I think the biggest takeaway I had being there was just that it never seemed to really resonate with them what was happening from a big picture standpoint.
It's interesting, Ira, because, and I thought about it first, just kind of asking you straight up, was it the look of a team that quit? But I think the correct term here for what Florida State is and isn't necessarily that it's a program that's quit, but it just kind of seems like you're right. It's a program that's almost so hung up in its own arrogance and that this is how we've always done things. And, of course, we're always going to make a bowl game. And, of course, we're always going to pull close games out. Florida State is a program that has taken things for granted so long that right now it thinks that its farts don't stink. And it's taken a look at, we're getting destroyed, obliterated by Boston College, but, ooh, that was a good play by me. I'm sure it'll all be right somehow. That's really what this looks like. Not necessarily a team that's quit, but a team that's literally almost in denial of what it is and what its program's become.
I think you might be right. I mean, I think it's almost like they're almost like they're detached. And I think, you see a lot of individual plays where, that kind of hammers home that point. I mean, and again, not to single just individual guys out, but I mean, these are just examples. Tavares McFadden trying to intercept a pass on fourth down, right in front of the goal line. I mean, it's like, man, think about the team. From a team standpoint, you just want that pass to fall incomplete. From your individual standpoint, maybe wanting to put up some interception numbers, you might want to catch that pass because it's going to help you with some statistics. But that's not the play for this team. And there are other examples. Even like, again, like the goal line stand later, where there were a couple times where they were trying to make a goal line stand. They ended up giving up the touchdown. But, you'd see they're already down 3 or 4 scores. And, somebody would make a stop and kind of celebrate, kind of do their hands like no way or whatever. And it's like, I mean, again, the big picture here is that you're going to lose this game. And where is that effort every other play? And so it's just it's been frustrating to watch. And and I know Jimbo, people just heard that interview with Jimbo, and I think he's starting to express some of that frustration. But he really didn't after the game. I mean, he admitted that they played poorly and they got to coach better and they got to do some things better. But there just hasn't been any like big passion or rallying point. It's almost been just they're just kind of going through the motions.
Well, I think Coach saw kind of to an extent what you saw. He looks at that all 22, and he must have saw a team that was disjointed and just an effort that was suboptimal. And listen, I'm just happy that Jimbo Fisher finally admitted they got beat, they looked bad, they executed poorly, and there's a lot of blame to go around. And, even though Jimbo was very tight-lipped about a bunch of things in that interview that he had with Gene, I think it's just an important step to know that when you listen to his interview, when you listen to the interview that he did with our friend Jeff Cameron that's coming on later this afternoon, you hear a guy that knows there is a problem in this program and it has to be fixed. And I think that's the first time publicly, at the very least, that fans have been able to hear that.
Yeah, and I try to touch on it in my column over the weekend about, you're starting to wonder if he's in denial or if he's just refusing to admit it publicly. And, I don't know. I'm basing up what he's saying now is maybe he's more willing to say it publicly. But, what he's tried in the past hasn't worked. And, I think really we've seen over these last few weeks with these close losses, it felt like he's kind of tried to play a little bit of good cop and, I think he's been worried about losing this team. And it's tough, man. It's tough when you're dealing with guys that haven't lost a lot of football games and they're going through disappointment and they're dealing with some injuries and things like that. and you don't know if you want to come down too hard on them because you might lose them. So I think he's tried to be a little bit more encouraging, and I think he's tried to kind of find positives and kind of try to bring them along and celebrate, the positives like he did after they beat Wake Forest and Duke. But then you have an effort like this, and okay, clearly that's not working. So now he's got to try this approach, and we'll see. I don't think there's any guarantee it's going to work. I mean, I'm sure it made some people feel good, but they still have to go out there and play on Saturday, and we'll see if they give a better effort than they've been giving.
Yeah, you mentioned your column, and I think you brought it up in that, is this just – there's been so much talk about the players, and, I know you don't like singling guys out, but, of course, Tavares McFadden has just kind of been the poster child this season for guys who've maybe been playing more for them instead of a team. And, of course, that's not all on him, and at least as the punt return situation goes, his coaching staff has had many a chance to make a change there and hasn't. And, you brought it up. Is this coaching staff, are some of these guys who maybe know their days are numbered, are they just kind of going through the motions right now? Is this just a paycheck collector for some of those dudes? Because right now, this program, outside of a couple people who you can tell are upset on the sidelines, a couple players, a couple coaches, and finally, of course, Jimbo Fisher publicly with these call-in interviews that he's been doing, for the longest time, this just kind of seems like it's been on autopilot and the captain hasn't been at the wheel.
Yeah, it's hard to say about the assistant coaches because, part of the problem is we never get to talk to them, So, we don't have great relationships with them. Jimbo keeps them off limits to the media. We talk to them once in the preseason and then sometimes maybe around a bowl game, but that's about it. So, it's hard to get a great feel for the assistant coaches and where they're at. It would be a little bit different if we could speak to them from week to week and maybe get an understanding of what some of their challenges are. But again, from watching them on the sideline again, yeah, man, you're not seeing anything. The only time I saw a coach really talking to players during that game, and I spent a lot of time watching the sidelines when I could during that game with the binoculars. The only time I really saw a coach kind of having sort of heart-to-heart kind of conversation, not a X's and O's or technique or assignment conversation, was I saw Odell Higgins talking to 4 or 5 of the defensive tackles, his position group, midway through the game, and it was very calm. And he kind of called them to the side to talk to them. It was very calm. And my guess is he was kind of telling them, this is just my guess, was something along the lines of, guys, play with pride. Don't let this, fall apart. Don't give up. Keep playing. Keep, doing what you can do, because that's really the only message I could imagine giving at that point. But it wasn't like a rah-rah message. And I really didn't see that in any other position group. So again, I think it's almost like, I don't know. I don't want to say that they felt like they were going to waste their breath. But again, I just don't get the sense from anybody I've talked to, and, talking to people in the days leading up to the game last week, people around the program, I didn't hear anything positive from anybody. I didn't hear anybody telling me, oh, it's really turned around now. This is a great week of practice or whatever. And even Jimbo, what he said was, it was tough early in the week after the Louisville loss, but by Tuesday it got better, and by Wednesday we had a really good practice. Well, that was a week where you only had 3 days of practice because of the short week, and you basically saying it wasn't very good until Wednesday. So I just think the coaches probably knew it hasn't been a good week of practice. I think they feel like they probably got some guys who are checked out, and I just feel like they just kind of didn't feel like there was any message they could get across to them during the game. Again, it's hard for me to judge those guys because I don't know them very well, but it almost felt like nobody there thought the outcome was going to be any different than it was, and they just kind of rode with it.
I feel like we've said this a lot of different weeks, but I feel now more than ever this game Saturday, Syracuse, homecoming weekend, this is kind of the game where we're going to find out everything we need to know about this football team. Now that rock bottom has finally been hit, established, you're 2-5. You weren't even competitive in that game where you severely at just about every single position should be more talented than the team you played, and you got blown off the field. Your head coach finally kind of admits that something needs to be done here. How do you look against a Syracuse team that somehow you've opened as almost a touchdown favorite against? And what do you have to play for in that game period?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a great question. I really don't know. I mean, and I'm curious what kind of crowd they're going to be. I mean, I assume since it's homecoming, some people who maybe planned ahead of time, like planned during the off season, that they were going to come to town for homecoming. Maybe they've got kids in school. There's going to be a reason for them to come to Tallahassee. But I think there's going to be a lot of other people who don't come. I think the crowd's going to be poor for a homecoming game, and I think the energy is not going to be great. And Syracuse is not a name opponent. And again, this is another one of those weeks where things don't really set up well for them. Just like last week, getting Boston College on a short week, but FSU being the team that has to travel, whereas BC gets to stay home. BC's been playing really well. FSU is not. I mean, all those things. This week, you have a similar situation where you're coming off of a humiliating loss, 2 losses in a row. Syracuse had a bye week last week, and they were playing really well before that. They beat Clemson. They almost beat Miami on the road, and then they've had a bye week this past week. So, and how fired up do you guys get to play Syracuse? And Syracuse has a mobile quarterback. They've got a high-tempo offense, which FSU struggles with. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, again, where this game doesn't set up well for Florida State, so they better bring it. But, we'll see. I mean, we'll see if these coaches can get through to these guys. But when a team's 2-5, it's tough to get through to those guys.
Finally, Ira, with a month of this season somehow still left to go, it feels like this season's gone on for about 3 years. But with this set to go, how do you think this team and these coaches respond, especially when it seems like for some of them the end's probably nigh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, right now I would say it's impossible for me to say, yeah, there's going to be some really impressive turnaround. I think you got several guys who are injured, several key guys, which already was going to hurt your cause. And in those situations, you need guys to rally together, but that hasn't been the case. It's been more of the opposite. So I think it's going to happen, especially this game. The way Jimbo talked and as embarrassed as they were after that game, my assumption is, I think this game they'll come out with some energy early, but the challenge is when a team's not doing well is to sustain it. You can come out, throw the first punch, maybe kind of hang in there for a little while, but if things start going poorly, can you stay with it? Do you believe? Do you believe in each other? Do you believe in the coaches? And that's where bad teams fall apart. And I think that's going to be what we see. I mean, my guess is this team's not going to play real well the rest of the season. I don't expect it to. Now, they'll beat Delaware State. They might beat Florida, depending on what's happening there with their situation after firing their coach and all that. But really, I wouldn't expect them to play great at Clemson. I think they'll come out with energy at Clemson. I don't expect them to play well there. I don't expect them to play real well against Syracuse. I don't. There's no signs of that that would lead you to believe that.
In 2014, you kept picking Florida State to win close games because they will until they don't. And right now, I think a lot of folks have reached the point to where Florida State's not going to look great. Florida State's probably going to lose because they will until they don't. Ira, we could talk for forever, but we got to run, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Take care.
Well, things weren't great for Florida State, but things certainly weren't great for our friends down the road in Gainesville this weekend. We'll talk about the Jim McElwain situation right after this on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. Maybe a Monday after work, maybe after Friday night with Florida State, you could use a beverage. And, of course, the best place to get that is the best happy hour in town with our friends at For the Table. Madison Social, Central, Township, all there in the heart of College Town. 3 great experiences, same great value, 4 to 7. That'll be an absolute blast, as always, there in the heart of College Town. Of course, Florida State, not the only one having a turbulent weekend. We have a couple minutes here at the end of the show, and I feel like we would be, despite all the stuff that's going on with FSU, absolutely remiss not to bring up that Florida doesn't have a permanent head coach at the moment. Jim McElwain was shown the door after a 42-7 beatdown in Jacksonville at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs. But, of course, we all know that's not exactly the reason he got fired. It's not going to help his case at all. But, of course, what he said in that press conference on Monday kind of seems like it was the nail in the coffin of giving those ideas that him and his family had received death threats and not really giving any evidence to back that up. And here's what I'll say about Jim McElwain. Jim McElwain was a guy who, just in hearing through the grapevine and stuff like that, was not very liked by the boosters and by the staff and all that to begin with. A guy who a lot of people were just looking for an excuse to maybe get rid of at a moment. But here's the thing. The dude had won the East back-to-back years. Even if the East hadn't been all that great, he'd still given them quote-unquote success. He hadn't beaten Florida State. He snapped a long losing streak to Tennessee, but he beat Georgia both years until this season. He'd won the East for you. He'd gotten you to decent bowl games. So you needed an excuse. Here's the problem. Jim McElwain gave his bosses an excuse. You add that with a 42-7 game, and he's out. It's that simple.
Yeah, I think this in the long run, first reaction, I wasn't really too sure about it. I understand why it happened, but when you really look at it and you look at what's happened in Gainesville over the last 2.5 years since he's been there, really his success was based on his first 2 seasons on a lot of luck against a lot of really bad teams, riding the coattails of a must-champ defense. His offense never improved. If anything, it got worse, and that's what he was brought in to do. And now that Muschamps recruits had, for the most part, cleared out of there, you've seen that defense getting a little bit worse this year. Like I said, that offense has gotten worse. And I think really at the end of the day, when something like this has happened, Florida, it's best case scenario for them, because instead of going through this for another year with another mediocre season until you have a good enough reason to fire the guy, you get him out now, you save yourself $8 million, and you can go get a coach and try to get this thing right again. And it'll be interesting to see what direction they go. Do they go with the guy like Scott Frost, who has a world of potential, but hasn't really, other than half a season at UCF, hasn't exactly proven that it's something he can do time and time again to turn a football team around? There's a lot of intrigue behind him, but are you willing to hire a guy based off of just his enormous potential, or do you go with a guy like, or try to go after a guy like Fuente, who's now turned around 2 programs and 2 programs quickly? Now, would Fuente leave Virginia Tech to go to Florida after being there for just 2 years? That I don't know. Or do you go for a guy like Norvell from Memphis, or do you go with Dan Mullen from Mississippi State? With their AD Strickland being from Mississippi State, they already have that working relationship. We know they like each other. It's going to be really interesting to see what direction they go with, but I'm just kind of hoping they somehow, some way screw it up and they're terrible for another couple of years.
Well, it's amazing the tremendous instability that's with the state of Florida in general. Florida State, and complete with all these assistant changes that are probably about to happen. You mentioned it, Scott Frost probably getting ready to go. I think for Florida, I know we got to wrap it up here, but for Florida, Occam's razor says that the simplest solution is often the best. Florida's tried the defense, the sexy coordinator in Muschamp. They tried the on-the-rise group of 5 coach. There's a Power 5 coach who's been consistently good at a program that should not be consistently good, with ties to your school and your AD. Dan Mullen, is it safe? Sure. Is it the sexiest? Probably not. But you know what? It makes the most sense for a program that desperately needs stability. And with that being said, we're all out of time. We're probably going to talk about that a little later this week. But first of all, my thanks to you, Drew.
Thank you.
My thanks to you guys for listening. We're back right here tomorrow. But until then, Mike and Mike's up next on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.